All right, welcome back, everyone. Today, we're unpacking a massive cultural document, and that is Dave Portnoy's explosive 2026 release, Cancel Me If You Can. Now, whether you are a day one Barstool fan or you're just studying modern media dynamics, we are going to give you a complete top-to-bottom overview of the origins, the behind-the-scenes feuds, and the honestly surprising new ambitions revealed in these pages.
Okay, so let's jump right into this with a pretty jarring high-energy quote from a recent Screenwise review. I think this perfectly sets the tone of the book. They wrote, Dave Portnoy is the human equivalent of a Red Bull mixed with a sports betting app. And honestly, that hits the nail right on the head. This text is loud, it is absolutely unapologetic, and it's explicitly designed to provoke a reaction from you.
So, here is the agenda for our explainer today. Number 1, an unconventional publishing bet. 2, building the Barstool empire. 3, feuds and corporate drama. 4, the Portnoy paradox. And finally, number 5, from media to politics. Starting off with section 1, an unconventional publishing bet, tossing the Harvard draft.
So get this, the story behind how this physical book was created is almost as wild as the actual content itself. Portnoy actually started the whole process with a ghostwriter. Specifically, there was this highly polished draft worked on for months by Francis Ellis, who's a Harvard-educated writer and Barstool employee. But Portnoy, he ultimately threw that entire sanitized draft right in the trash. He wanted to preserve his raw, unfiltered brand. So despite dealing with a physical injury at the time, Portnoy wrote the final manuscript entirely himself, literally typing the whole thing up using just one shoulder. It was this incredibly deliberate choice to favor raw authenticity over, institutional polish.
And this really brilliantly illustrates just how far he goes to maintain that anti-establishment persona. Take the self-narrated audiobook, for example. In traditional publishing, editors scrub out every little verbal error, right? Well, Portnoy strategically leaves them in. He explicitly mispronounces misogynist as misogenic, and he casually swaps the word anecdote for antidote. Now, this isn't laziness, it's a deliberate authentication tactic. It signals straight to his core audience that he's still just an ordinary, unpolished guy who's fighting against the hyper-managed corporate suits.
Moving on to section 2, building the Barstool empire, from broadsheet to nine-figure brand.
That anti-suit mentality, that is the foundational DNA of the entire company. It all started back in 2004, with Portnoy literally passing out a 4-page broadsheet newspaper by hand, right on the streets of Boston. Because he realized fans didn't actually want polished sports takes from anchors and tailored suits. They wanted the raw, unfiltered language of a local sports bar. Then, fast forward through their massive digital expansion in the 2010s, the huge 2020 boom of sports betting, and those incredibly famous pizza reviews. And by 2026, Barstool is a 9-figure behemoth with over 300 employees and 150 active brands. Just insane growth.
But as you can imagine, scaling up meant seriously clashing with traditional media gatekeepers. And the book shares this just incredible anecdote about that friction. During an early pitch meeting out in LA, a suited United Talent Agency executive was discussing their TV strategy. This exec points directly at a 22-year-old Barstool employee named Hank, who's just sitting there in a t-shirt and shorts, and condescendingly goes, "And who's going to produce this? Not this guy." It perfectly encapsulates that early culture clash between Barstool's frat house aesthetic and the so-called functional adults of the corporate world.
Let's get into section 3, feuds and corporate drama, poisonous relationships behind the curtain. As the money got bigger, the cloches definitely moved internally. Take a look at this massive number, $7 million. Portnoy reveals in the book that he nearly blew up the monumental Chernin Group transition to Penn National Gaming over this exact figure. Why? Because Peter Chernin reportedly refused to grant a $7 million bonus to Dan Big Cats. So Portnoy was literally willing to risk a life-changing corporate exit just to ensure his top talent got paid. It's a really fascinating look at how he prioritizes inner circle loyalty way above standard institutional alignment. And the book doesn't stop there, for sure. It spills a ton of behind-the-scenes drama. Portnoy addresses Pat McAfee's 2018 exit, claiming McAfee basically blew his distrust of Barstool's business side completely out of proportion, specifically throwing former executive Lou Roberts under the bus. He also dives headfirst into the massive Call Her Daddy drama, detailing how the hosts allegedly plotted behind the scenes to break their contracts. And then, of course, there is the legendary 20-year-old grudge with Bill Simmons. Now, the Simmons Feud is an absolute masterclass in how Dave Portnoy holds a grudge. In the book, he details how he finally felt he won this decades-old rivalry. How'd he do it? By directly poaching talent connected to Simmons. Portnoy brought over Ryen Russillo and, incredibly, Bill Simmons' actual nephew, Kyle Crichton, right to Barstool. As Portnoy tells it, signing them closed a 15-year loop. It was his ultimate tactical defense of his intellectual property and his brand supremacy.
This brings us to Section 4, the Portnoy paradox: toxic boss or philanthropist? You have a really stark contrast going on here. On one hand, you've got these incredibly abrasive elements, right? A profanity-laced book detailing toxic relationships and this scorched earth mentality against any haters. Yet, you have to reconcile all of that with his undeniable philanthropic efforts. We're talking about the Barstool Fund, which raised over $41 million to save struggling small businesses during the pandemic, and of course, his massive advocacy for animal shelters, which completely blew up with his famous rescue dog, Miss Peaches. It's quite the juxtaposition. To actually put some numbers to this paradox, just look at the screen-wise parental ratings for the book. It scored an incredibly low 25 out of 100 on the wholesome metric and only a 38 on safe, mostly due to the normalized toxicity and heavy gambling culture. But it scored a 58 on enriching. Why? Because reviewers genuinely acknowledge the value in the entrepreneurial hustle and the intense resilience required to build an empire like his. It just makes for a deeply complex media profile. And finally, Section 5, from media to politics, the ultimate campaign launch. So what does this all mean? Is this media dominance simply a stepping stone for him? Well, during the June 2026 promotional tour for this book, industry analysts noted a really distinct shift in Portnoy's strategy. Historically, he always embraced this loose, anti-establishment posture that basically avoided traditional party politics. But as this quote from a cultural analysis of the book suggests, Portnoy is now actively seeking to convert his highly active, fiercely loyal digital audience into direct executive political power. And he is not being shy about it. He's naming specific targets. On Fox News, speaking directly with Jesse Waters, Portnoy publicly floated a potential run for mayor of New York City. His specific target? Incumbent Zohan Mamdani, who Portnoy has openly labeled a communist. His strategy appears to be framing local municipal governance as the ultimate battleground against institutional overreach and cancel culture. Essentially, he's taking the exact themes of his book and trying to apply them directly to a political ballot. So we have to ask ourselves, is Cancel Me If You Can simply a defensive business memoir about the wild rise of Barstool Sports? Or are we actually looking at the ultimate unpolished campaign launch for an entirely new kind of political candidate? Love him or absolutely hate him, Dave Portnoy knows exactly how to keep the world betting on his next move. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and we will see you next time.